If you look at the expectations over the next 5 to 10 years, there's a demand for more copper than we've mined so far in history.
What are your thoughts during the crash?
The crash is coming. If you're that emphatic that the crash is coming, how short are you right now? Oh no, I'm not. So you don't actually believe that which you're saying.
Digging the well before you need the water is where most people see the opportunity.
You know, you make your money when you buy, not when you sell.
The markets at the time of this recording are at record highs, which means eventually what goes up must come down to some degree.
I mean, you look through history, Apple 2008 was about $3, Google was about $2.50, JP Morgan was about $90.
Yeah.
You look at where they're trading at now, $3.50 for Google and Apple and $2.60 for JP Morgan. It's just crazy when you look at that, and that comes from having the fortitude to better buy when the news doesn't look great. Stocks that would benefit from a market crash. Markets do correct from time to time, and knowing where to place your money to capitalize on that is extremely important. What if your portfolio was generating a consistent income, regardless of whether the market was going up, down, or sideways? That's not a pipe dream, that's a strategy I've been using and teaching for over 25 years, and I want to show it to you for free. At my Cash Flow on Demand online workshop, I will walk you through the exact framework I use to generate regular income from investments without watching screens all day or taking on reckless risk. Seats fill up fast. Register now at the link in the show notes, and I'll see you there. Hey guys, welcome to the Suits Money and Investing Show with me, your host, Andrew Baxter, and as always, my offsider and co-host, Mitchell Olarenshaw.
Thanks for having me on, AB. Great episode installed today. I'm going to jump straight into it. We're trying to mess around with the segue today. It's the 5 stocks that we're going to buy before the next market crash. Now, this has come up so many times amongst our clients, not because they're scared, but markets at the time of this recording are at record highs, which means eventually what goes up must come down to some degree. Digging the well before you need the water is where most people see the opportunity.
Interesting, isn't it? That, you make your money when you buy, not when you sell sometimes. And those corrections as they come along certainly provide great buying opportunities. There's plenty of examples of that. I mean, you look through history, I had a quick look at some of the levels for stocks that, you'd have in your portfolio today if you're serious about wanting to make money. Pick 3 examples: Apple, Google, and JP Morgan.
Nice.
Just to give 3 different things. Apple 2008 was about $3, Google was about $2.50, JP Morgan was about $90.
Super cash heavy too, particularly in the case of Apple, which means they can wear through any environment, really.
Absolutely. JP Morgan a bit more tricky at that time because that was the sort of GFC time where the banking sector was. Look at the COVID correction in 2020, Apple had got itself to 60, Google 50, and JP Morgan 100. You look at where they're trading at now, $3.50 for Google and Apple and $2.60 for JP Morgan. It's just crazy when you look at that, and that comes from having the fortitude to better buy when the news doesn't look great. And that's what happens when you buy good businesses that have great cash flow and good, solid long-term earnings prospect.
That's it. And I also think the notion of time is really important here for our listeners. We do have bear markets through market cycles. There's no question. 2008, 2020, 2022 are 3 most recent examples, I would say. Bear market might last, for example, between 6 or 9 months, roughly on average. Now, if you're an investor that is just trying to overclub it every time, look for the next best, hottest thing, the most aggressive play, you're likely going to spend 6 or 9 months either out of the market or losing on your positions. They're really your 2 options. My philosophy is time is of the essence in that 6 to 9 months, even though most stocks may be going down during a bear market because they are correlated. Those crash-proof businesses are what offer you good income through those periods of time and good stability.
Yeah, just back that up for a second and look at the circumstance. If you're going into a correction territory in markets, or at least you wouldn't know that till after the effect, but seeing that breakdown of the uptrend, what's your risk management that you're using in the first instance? You have to have risk management. You can't retrospectively go, oh, got that wrong, let's buy some other stock. So, you've got to look at how you go about protecting the investments that you currently have, whether you have an exit strategy for them or just maybe using options to protect them. There's a myriad of things that you can do. What then constitutes a bear market? Do you look for a good stock, or do you try and trade the bear market? Is another philosophical question for people too, which,
I think both, right?
Yeah. So if your view is, all right, we're going to be in a bear market, and I have this dialogue with people on socials quite often where they go, oh, the crash is coming, which it is, it always is. But
at some point,
if you sit on the sidelines, you miss out on everything. The opportunity cost is too great. So if you, and I always ask them, I say, look, if you're that emphatic that the crash is coming, how short are you right now? Oh no, I'm not. So you don't actually believe that which you're saying.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Anyway, let's get on to the topic at hand. What's
okay? So I think if you're, and one thing I will say too is build this watch list out before the fact.
Too right.
So that you're not having to think about it during that sort of red brain time.
Really, really important point. That notion of, okay, here is my defensive/correction portfolio if I need that, as opposed to what you're in rank and file every day. That's my go-to when things get a little bit messy and untidy. And you're right, sitting down in the cool light of day, couple of hours on a Sunday with a cup of tea and actually working on stocks that either are inversely correlated to the market or are in a situation where they tend to do a lot better during those corrections. And that's your, in case of emergency, break glass portfolio.
That's it. Let's start off number one. Stocks that typically hold up really well during times of volatility would be that of the consumer staples sector. Two stocks I like in there would be Walmart and Procter & Gamble, for example.
Two great stocks. I mean, Walmart in particular, it is just such a dominant feature. I think I'm right in saying this. I think it's the largest private sector employer in the world.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And you think about the length and breadth that Walmart now covers. You have to buy food, and if the economy is a little bit tough, you have to buy stuff that's a little bit cheaper. It might be a different variant of the brand that you would ordinarily buy. And Walmart, of course, is multiple thousands of square meters of retail space that is tailored exactly to that. So you might be in a situation where, when times are good, to use a couple of US examples, you might be shopping at Whole Foods, for example, which would be a sort of Harris Markets type business over there. Also now owned by Amazon, I might add. They bought them out a few years ago. I used to love trading Whole Foods. And your groceries are not cheap there, because they're as organic as you're going to find in the US. And all of a sudden you go, okay, well, budget's a little bit tighter or whatever. I need to buy somewhere else. I can make ends meet and cover my household expenses. Walmart's probably going to be the beneficiary. That is a big jump. That's a sort of night and day jump. There are a few places you could sort of switch through in the middle, but it's a good example of why in those circumstances Walmart typically does well. Back to school. Okay, are we going to go buy really nice bits and pieces, or can we just get the kids in some sports kit for school? It's that kind of space.
Inelastic demand, I think, is what you're referring to.
And it's incredibly. I remember I took my father-in-law to Walmart for the first time in Las Vegas, of all places. I'd not been to any, sort of heard about it. Was like, let's go and have a look. It's been there for hours, and
really,
he was fascinated with it.
I can't say I've ever been to a Walmart.
It is an extraordinary experience because the breadth of what's carried. I'm talking in a really big Walmart somewhere. So you've got your outdoor stuff, hunting, you can buy firearms and ammunition, and a crossbow and knives. You can go and buy barbecue.
So it's Bunnings meets Aldi.
Meets everything.
Yeah,
BCF all wrapped up
everything in
one thing.
Meets the gun shop.
And then at the other end of the scale, and at the time, this is going back some time ago now, they just started to push into organic food. So you can go and buy organic product there too, and everything in between. So it's an incredible experience. You can actually, in an RV, for example, you can pull up, you can actually camp in the Walmart car park. They've got insurance. There's a whole raft of stuff. I'm not being an advocate for them, but it's why it's such a good defensive business, because it's got such a broad catch.
It's the staple. Okay. Number two.
Procter & Gamble, same thing. I mean, you can wash your clothes or eat your what are the total brain fart? What are they called? They come in the tube, Pringles.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
they're Procter & Gamble. There you go. Okay. The definition of inelastic, number two, has to be healthcare. I think during times of market crash, these are the businesses which typically hold up the best. So stocks like Johnson & Johnson, for example, even CVS Health Corp.
Yeah, I think there's that space. If times are a little bit tough, I think I might forego my medication today. It's not a conversation that you're very likely to have. And so again, in that respect, there's an inelastic demand. People are going to get that coverage. And so these are stocks that may not be spectacular when they perform, but they're really good safe havens when things are a little bit tricky. And your more volatile stocks that have been the market darling are very much out of favor. Interesting with hospitals, I was having dinner on Friday with somebody, and he said that the amount of money they've got piling in at the moment into Australia, actually, to invest in the private hospital space is
really
huge, all from offshore. Tons of money coming.
Interesting. Okay. Number 3, what about broad market ETFs? And the reason I say broad market ETFs is that they're index-based, so you're fully diversified. During market crashes, they can often be a great time to take a long-term approach. You might be subject to some volatility short-term, but a long-term approach on the market, cheaper prices.
I think ETFs sometimes are a really widely misunderstood instrument where people go, oh, they're the basic place for people. They can actually be incredibly sophisticated too in terms of how you choose to use them. It's like anything. It can be as good or as bad as you want to make it. That notion of investing in a broad market ETF for anybody that's unsure, new to investing, or even more experienced is a no-brainer because it removes stock selection risk before you start. So if you invest in SPY or the QQQ, you don't have to pick which Nasdaq stock you're going to invest in or which S&P stock you're going to invest in. You're getting a slice of everything. So effectively what you've got is an extremely well managed fund that tracks the market perfectly because it is the market, that has a very low management expense ratio. Why would you want to be in a managed fund? You should be in an index ETF. It's going to give you, significantly better return over time. Noting that most managed funds underperform the market because managed funds are based around stock picking. And so as an individual investor, you're going to be tied with the same challenge of picking the right or the wrong stocks. You might be quite fortunate. We pick up some really good stuff. It might be that you get on the wrong side of it. And investing in a broad market ETF takes all of that risk away. And I think that's something that's often overlooked by people. So having, and you can always add to them as well. You could just, if you've got a regular savings account, you just park more money into an index ETF. Great place to start. If you combine it with the options work we do, it can actually be a very, very good source of income as well.
Excellent. I like that. Okay, number 4, utilities. I know you like this sector, so I'll hand it over to you. What are your thoughts during the crash?
Utilities, again, they're that defensive space where, they're not the most exciting of stocks. I suspect we might actually see some very, very strong performance from that sector, particularly in the US, for macro reasons being AI and tech and changing demand for electricity. But utilities, rather like healthcare, you need water, you need electric, you're going to pipe it in, plumb it in, whatever. Excuse me. And the notion of investing in them is they're typically quite good from an earnings perspective. They usually pay a dividend of some description, and they're good, stable businesses. And what we're talking about here is stability in times that are unstable. So a smart investor isn't one that's looking to white knuckle the market like a roller coaster. You go, okay, things are a bit choppy here. I don't need the cortisol overload of being in something that's quite a volatile stock. I'm just going to park some cash. So I stay in the market, either a broad index ETF or defensive stocks like we talked about with, say, Walmart, Procter & Gamble, or utilities. Why I like utilities, if I look at that over the longer term, if you look at the grid in the US, it's very old. If you look at the grid in Australia, the same conversation. Recently there was a fire in the US caused by a power line coming down. That power line was 106 years old. Now, if you think about what electricity looked like 106 years ago versus what we need to pull now for a car, for your computer, for charging your phone, for your plasma screen at home, your air conditioning, your tumble dryer, your induction stovetop, and everything else that sits around there. So the notion of needing to rebuild a grid could potentially put the utility companies in a very, very good space. But not just the utility companies, the support companies that sit behind them that actually do the toil and labor to build that grid. So that is something that's a sleeper for me.
Nice.
And you look at the tailwind of EV sales and things like AI data center stuff, that puts those companies, I think, in a fairly strong position.
Nice.
Not just in a volatility play, but just generally long term.
Okay, nice. And I think utility specific play, Next Era Energy, NEE, is probably the top of our list here on the desk, which is quite cool.
There you go. I mean, there is a requirement for infrastructure, and these are the companies that are going to put it in.
That's it. Okay, number 5. I want to have some fun with this. So let's make this number 5 category our spice category if we can. We've done 4 nice and conservative plays for our more aggressive investors out there. Let's give them a spicy play. So I'll start off. So you've got the trend.
How many over the nets are we having with this?
Just one each.
Point?
You get pick one each. One investment vehicle each. All right. So I picked TQQQ. Now, for the benefit of our listeners, I know you love TQQQ too. I'll steal it off you. It's a 3 times leveraged Nasdaq tracking exchange traded fund. So 1% up on the Nasdaq equals 3% up on TQQQ. Of course, it can also go the other way to the downside too. So you can be very, very careful with that asset. During market crashes, say the market's down 10%, 20%, that is the absolute best time to be loading up into something like that.
Yeah, look, I love, as you know, I've got a ton of it. I love T triple Q.
You
So
do?
thanks for stealing my thunder there.
That's okay.
I think it's really hard because you've just sort of aced me with it's 100 stocks in that, so you've sort of got your bullish position sorted out on a diversified portfolio. I think there's a lot of talk about AI, and I'm going to talk across 4 or 5 stocks within space. So there's talk of a bubble in many instances, and we've spoken to this previously. The notion of, for example, Nvidia being overvalued. It's about 30 times, depending on the metric used, anywhere between 20 and 25 and about 30 times earnings. If you look at Cisco Systems during the tech wreck, it was trading at 150 times earnings. So the notion of valuation stretch is not really the case with stocks like Nvidia. This is a company that is building out for the future. There are massive capacity constraints in chip manufacturing. It's not going to be able to meet demand, and you've got an insatiable appetite at any price because people want to win the AI war. So that is a business that is basically selling a product into an inelastic demand curve, which has to be good for its earnings. So that's an example in that space.
Nice.
If you look more broadly, at the hyperscalers, I think Google is definitely in a position where not only is it already doing it in terms of leveraging AI, in terms of its search engine model, it is a good product that it's really pushing out there in terms of wide take up. So, Google already has great earnings, and AI is the next bolt to that. And I think outside of those two, which are in more the high tech space, the lower tech space, and I don't mean this as a criticism, would be stocks like Apple, where you've just got that continual pipeline of income coming in, and those sorts of stocks, all of which have vast amounts of money flowing in the door, have strong earnings, they're real businesses. And the difference between this and a stock in, say, a dot-com era, where you've got someone that's selling a dot concept as opposed to a real product,
I like that.
is day and night. So these are stocks that are very, very strong, powerful businesses. You could throw Amazon into that mix too, on the basis of, if it's got the ability to significantly cut its warehousing costs and stock picking costs using technology, that's all on the bottom line. It's going to be a beneficiary of where AI is going as well. Again, another cash press of a business. SpaceX, interesting listing recently. All things Musk, you can't not back it. Does it look overvalued? I think by any normal metric, absolutely. But you're not dealing with someone that you can measure by any normal metric.
Mm-hmm.
You're dealing with someone that's changing the world in multiple different ways at the same time. Now, they all happen to be in that Nasdaq space, but that's where we see the future. If you want an outlier for me, if you really want to punt,
go on.
I like the notion of exposure to commodity space, particularly something like copper. I think the fight for rare earths, and copper's not a rare earth, but the fight for rare earths and what we've seen, come out of trade with China, for example, has really reflected the lack of investment in the Western world on rare earths and things like that. The demand for copper, you look at the volume of copper used in an EV versus a normal car, a petrol car. If you look, or combustion car, if you look at in the tech space with AI and everything that's going alongside that, is just this enormous quantum demand of copper. And if you look at the expectations over the next 5 to 10 years, there's a demand for more copper than we've mined so far in history. So finding companies that are in that space, a lot of the traditional resources, look at Chile, those mines are over 100 years old. They're starting to deplete in terms of their yield. Finding the next play in that space, I think, is just something that's a nice sleeper. That's my wild card for you.
There you go. AB, thank you very much. There's 5 pockets of opportunity during a market crash. So the question is to our listeners, what have we forgotten? And if we've forgotten something, or you like a stock or a sector, comment below. We'd love to see it.
It's interesting you talk about them as pockets of opportunity. You're only going to see those pockets of opportunity if you want to take the blinkers off.
Yeah.
If you're shut to it, you won't see them. You just go, it's a correction. It was always going to happen. I'm glad I'm out. That's why I've been selling cash for the last 10 years because I thought it was all going to blow up, and I was right. You've missed out on so much money taking that philosophy. Even if the market pulled back 30, 40%, you're going to be way ahead than someone that was sitting in cash 10, 15 years ago waiting for it all to implode. Markets are a reflection of optimism, and we're very fortunate we're on a planet where people are generally more optimistic about the future, and that's why markets keep driving higher. Those sorts of stocks almost certainly would perform or outperform during those types of conditions, and that's why they're in the conversation today.
Easy. AB, thank you very much.
My pleasure, anytime. There you have it, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. most importantly, hit that notification button, and we'll look forward to hosting you next week.